Okay, let's kick off this explainer with a question that honestly might challenge everything you think you know about burning calories. What actually burns more energy over the course of a day? Lacing up your sneakers and running a mile, or simply sitting on your couch and keeping your brain turned on? Well, the answer might surprise you, and it completely rewrites how we understand our own metabolism. Today, we're going to look at the human body not just as flesh and bone, but as a highly sophisticated biological machine running on a really precise energy budget. We are constantly interconverting kinetic and potential energy to power our physiological processes, maintaining this delicate energy balance that literally keeps us alive. Welcome to the explainer on decoding energy metabolism. To understand exactly how this biological engine works, here's our roadmap. We'll start with the fuel, move into the idling engine, look at diagnostics, and finish up with the throttle.
Section 1. The fuel, powering the biological machine.
So, contrary to popular belief, your muscles can't actually use the food you eat directly. No way. Every single bite of food you consume has to first be converted into a molecule called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP for short. You can think of ATP as the universal energy currency of your cells. The real energy is actually released when a specific phosphate bond inside that ATP is broken down. Without this conversion process, your engine simply cannot run. Now, what's really fascinating here is how our total energy expenditure is actually divided up. That physical activity we all obsess over at the gym, it's a much smaller piece of the pie than you'd think, only making up about 15 to 30%. A massive 60 to 70% of your daily energy budget goes strictly to your basal metabolic rate, literally just the energy required to stay alive. And that final 10%, that's what we call the thermic effect of food. Which brings us to Section 2, the idling engine, your basal metabolic rate. Picture this, you're lying perfectly still. Even then, your body is secretly running a marathon on the inside. Your lungs are pumping oxygen, your heart is circulating blood, your kidneys are excreting waste, and your liver is detoxifying. Which begs a really fascinating question. If you are doing absolutely nothing, which of your organs do you think is consuming the most energy? Well, while your skeletal muscle takes up about 30% of those basal calories overall, get this. Your brain and your liver each consume a staggering 23%. The brain and nervous tissue alone account for roughly 1/8 of all the energy you use at the basal state. These metabolically active organs use far, far more energy per gram of tissue than less active stuff like fat or bone. Let's move into the science of how we actually measure this. There's a big difference between true basal metabolic rate and resting energy expenditure, or REE. To capture a true BMR, you have to be measured early in the morning, right after a 10 to 12-hour fast, resting in a perfectly thermoneutral environment. But because those conditions are incredibly strict, scientists often just measure REE instead. That's done under much more relaxed conditions, so it's typically 10 to 20% higher than your true BMR. All right, Section 3, Diagnostics, how scientists measure the burn. So how do researchers actually quantify this internal fire? Basically, they use two main methods. The first is direct calorimetry. This is wild. They literally place a subject in a heavily insulated room, like the classic Atwater and Raza respiration calorimeter, and measure the actual heat the body radiates into water circulating in the walls. It tracks heat loss through radiation, conduction, and evaporation. But the second, much more common method is indirect calorimetry, which measures the oxygen you consume as a really clever proxy for the heat you're generating. Let's look at the classic Benedict Roth apparatus as an example of closed-circuit indirect calorimetry. Here's how it works. You inhale oxygen from a floating spirometer vessel and then exhale back into a closed circuit. A specialized soda-lime container removes the carbon dioxide you breathe out. By just measuring the volume of oxygen you consumed over a quick 6-minute test period, scientists get a remarkably reliable proxy for your total heat output. And that leads us to a magic number, 39.5. That is the normal average BMR, measured in kilocalories per hour per square meter of body surface area. Using body surface area instead of just body weight gives us a highly standardized measurement, and severe deviations from this 39.5 average, those are major diagnostic clues. A BMR elevated by 50% could flag hyperthyroidism, while a severe drop could indicate hypothyroidism. But what exactly is your engine burning? By analyzing the ratio of exhaled carbon dioxide to inhaled oxygen, scientists calculate the respiratory quotient, or RQ. This is a brilliant diagnostic tool that tells us exactly which macronutrient your engine is running on in real time. If you're primarily burning carbs, your RQ is 1.0. Burning proteins, it sits around 0.82. And if you're burning fats, it drops to roughly 0.7. It's literally a real-time monitor for your fuel lines. Of course, for free-living subjects outside the strict conditions of a lab setting, the absolute gold standard for measuring total energy expenditure is something called doubly labeled water. Subjects drink water tagged with two non-radioactive stable isotopes, deuterium and oxygen-18. By tracking how fast these isotopes are eliminated in urine over a few weeks, scientists get an incredibly accurate real-world picture of total carbon dioxide production without locking anyone in a calorimeter room. Moving on to Section 4, the throttle. Pushing the engine into overdrive. We've mapped out the idling baseline, but there are so many hidden factors that can throttle that energy use. Genetic differences alone can swing your BMR by 10% either way. Sleep lowers it by about 10% because your muscle tone drops. Stimulants, things like caffeine or nicotine, can actually spike it by 10 to 15%. But the most dramatic throttle is illness. Get this. A single degree Celsius increase in your body temperature during a fever spikes your BMR by about 13%. Beyond that baseline, we have your physical activity level, or PAL. This acts as your active throttle, measuring the total energy cost of your daily activities. What's absolutely crucial to understand is that PAL combines two things: activity thermogenesis, which is your structured gym time, and non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT. NEAT covers the energy cost of everything else, from walking around the house to simply fidgeting your foot at your desk. And your day job? It heavily dictates this daily energy multiplier. If you have a chair-bound job with very little movement, your PAL multiplier sits right around 1.2. But someone doing strenuous work, like a construction worker or a farmer harvesting crops by hand, pushes their engine to a multiplier of 2.0 to 2.4. Their engine is literally operating at nearly double the intensity of someone sitting at a computer all day. And it all really builds up over time. Think about how an hour of different activities incrementally stacks up your total energy expenditure. Lying quietly adds nothing to your baseline. But walk the dog for an hour and you add 0.09 to your PAL. Moderate cycling adds 0.27. And jogging a 10-minute mile for an hour, that adds a massive 0.53 to your resting baseline. Now here's a fun one. Even the simple act of eating burns energy. The thermic effect of food means your body burns calories just to digest, absorb, and metabolize your meals. This accounts for roughly 10% of your BMR. Interestingly, what you eat totally matters here. It requires significantly more energy to process complex proteins and carbohydrates than it does to process fats. Even keeping a regular eating schedule or adding a kick of spicy food can marginally increase this thermic effect. So what is the big takeaway from all this? Well, while your baseline metabolism is mostly fixed by the demands of your organs, there actually is a way to upgrade the engine. A single gym session just gives you a temporary burn, but intense habitual activity can actually force the engine to idle at a higher RPM all the time. In heavily active men, this can increase the resting metabolic rate by up to 14%. Wrapping up this explainer, we've seen that calorie burning is a deeply complex, highly individualized biological symphony. It's powered by ATP, dominated by the demands of your brain and liver, and throttled by everything from a slight fever to a fidgety foot. So, I'll leave you to wonder, what exactly is fueling your engine right now, and how efficiently is it running today?